Welcome to this SEC After Dark review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. We all went and saw this movie Friday night. We let it marinate for about 2 days, and now we are going to talk about it in this spoiler-filled review of the movie. If you do not want spoilers, stop watching the video now, because anything that happens after now is not my fault. I'm here with Jeb Beecham. I'm here with Bill Couch, and we are going to talk about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I really like this movie, but Jeb, give us a little brief synopsis of what happened in this movie.
Well, all right. Just remember that I've only seen this once, and it was in theaters, so I have not had a chance to go back and watch it again, which I definitely want to do. But here's what I remember. So basically, the movie starts off with a nice flashback where they do actually pretty well CGI'd young Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. It's right at the end of World War II, and the Nazis are trying to get away with a lot of the treasure they have. Obviously, Hitler's already gone into hiding, and they're looking for him, but he's not involved in this. And while they're trying to pack up and get on this train and get out of town, Indiana Jones and a friend of his, who's another archaeologist, professor, I guess, of history, they kind of invade the place and try and get back just what they think is there. I think what they're looking for is the Spear of Destiny, but it turns out not to actually be there. And I won't get into too much detail what happens. For whatever reason, they don't find it. They do find something else that they find interesting, and they get away with that. There was a Nazi scientist there who also wanted it, but they get rid of him, take off. And that pretty much ends that. That's a flashback just to give you a little background. And then they go into present day for this movie, which won't actually be present day for us, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so Indiana Jones at this point is now a professor who's at retirement age, basically. He's gotten kind of bitter. You kind of get a little bit of details of him having lost his son, his wife Marion having left him. So he basically just lives by himself and is a cranky old man. Doesn't seem to put his heart too much into teaching anymore. And that's just kind of where he is when suddenly a woman shows up to talk to him. That turns out to be the daughter of his friend, the old professor from the flashback scene. And she talks about his last obsession, which was this doll they found, this artifact they found on the Nazi train that they then apparently immediately lost. So he decides to help her kind of work this out as to what it is they found. It was only half of an entire object, so she wants to go looking for the other half, which he doesn't really think is a good idea, but he kind of helps her out a bit. But while he's talking to her about it, they're attacked by people that claim to be the government, basically, this government agency, coming to collect them because they've been looking for her, because they're looking for this artifact themselves. And that starts this whole adventure, basically, where they're running away from these government people, trying to find the other half of the dial. Turns out Nazis who may have come over via Operation Paperclip have infiltrated parts of our government and are now also looking for this. And it becomes just kind of a wild adventure of him and this woman. And it gets real interesting with some, more fleshed out backstories of the woman's not actually an archaeologist. She's more of a treasure hunter, just kind of seeking these things out to sell them, which, of course, is the thing Indiana Jones generally fights about in all of his other movies. He's always fighting against people who just want to sell pieces of history off or use it for nefarious means, where he always wants these to go to a museum. She has her own little version of Short Round. It's all very interesting. And then after, the adventure, finding all the pieces, they do actually assemble the product, use it how it's supposed to be used, which does at this point, and we said spoiler fills, it does at this point involve some time travel and a famous mathematician named Archimedes. But in the end, everybody gets back, is happy, and Nazis are dead. Everybody moves along. So that's basically a real quick just rundown of what happened in the movie, the plot.
Yes. The one thing that this movie, in fact, confirmed is the best Indiana Jones movie have the Nazis as villains.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
We don't talk about the commies. Yeah, let's leave that out.
So I do think it was interesting. There were some nice little Easter eggs that have been dropped on here. Basically, a couple of times, Indiana Jones basically told stories of things that happened. Like he recounted the Temple of Doom, and there's several things with Marion that popped up, and there were some really interesting nods to previous movies, but it wasn't nostalgia film. It felt like a true Indiana Jones movie in the same vein of all those 80s type adventure action serial movies. And honestly, I enjoyed this movie. I want to go in the theater and see it again.
Yeah, I'd say as an Indiana Jones fan, I did too. I think there were a lot of kind of nods to earlier movies and callbacks and a lot of nostalgia stuff, which they throw in. And I understand some people will complain about that. I liked it. If you're a big fan of Indiana Jones, at least the first three movies, I think you'll enjoy it a lot too. If you're not, some of that stuff may go over your head, but I don't think it takes away from the movie. I agree with that.
And that's the thing. After watching it and after sitting on it for a couple of days, like Steven said, I've come to appreciate it a lot more than when I saw it the other night. It definitely needs a second and third viewing to see everything that you probably didn't see the first time you saw it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I like movies like that where you have to.
And
it is
just a good Indiana Jones movie. They're not reinventing the wheel, but they don't have to. You know what I mean? It was just great from start to finish. I mean, for an Indiana Jones movie.
The impression I got from it, and they may not have been hiding this too hard, but the impression I got was this was kind of how they wanted to end Indiana Jones. They wanted to have one more great adventure. I mean, he's at this point in his age, he's not going to have any others, but you would assume. But I think they just wanted to make this as much of an Indiana Jones movie as they could. That was nostalgic, that Indiana Jones fans were going to go back and watch, really like and relate to, and kind of remind them of their early movies that they loved. And I don't know, they kind of got off track, I think, a little bit with the last one, although it wasn't a terrible movie either, but they got a little off track. This one, I think, they just tried to bring it back and let's just make one more great Indiana Jones movie. And I think they did. I think it's a good ending. It's the way this series should end.
Yeah, and like I said, this is a spoiler-filled video. So if you're still watching this is on you, honestly, at this point. Because also, I think the ending of this movie was about as perfect as you could end an Indiana Jones movie. The whole series, the whole everything. It was just a perfect ending.
Yeah. And
it was for sure. And the fact that again, spoiler, Indy had a complete character arc throughout the movie where basically it's how Indy got his groove back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He starts out the movie as this just beat down, haggard old man. And this woman comes along, his goddaughter, and just completely just takes him on this adventure and completely changes his way of life. Gives him a kick in the pants that he needed to basically become his old self again. And
it is amusing to see him kind of fight that, not wanting to go, not wanting to do it, and just reluctantly, as he's going, more and more and more gets into it. Until the end, he's just fully into the adventure, which was great.
Yeah. But that was really cool because you did get to see that move, and it's like I said, if you're watching this video, and you're worried about spoilers, it's on you at this point. So because we're about to kind of get in the weeds a little bit about this, like there were corrections from the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but there was no changes. He separated from Marion and Mutt, Shia LaBeouf's character from Crystal Skull, enlisted in the army in Vietnam and died.
Yeah.
And that him dying completely messed up his marriage and everything with Marion, completely took away Harrison Ford's groove to the point where he was just that old professor, as he describes his father in Last Crusade, that professor that taught whatever that kids hoped they didn't get. And that's kind of what he had become. And he has a retirement party, decides to walk away, and they get him a clock for it. He immediately gives that clock away. Everything is meaningless to this guy. So then he meets his goddaughter, who is Helen is her name, who is, like Jeb said, the epitome of all the things that Indiana Jones in the first three movies fought against. Now, I mean, you saw that. You've heard Indiana Jones say it belongs in a museum. She would be the type character like that. It says, so do you. And it just goes on. And basically, she steals the dial and runs off. She was just going to leave Indiana Jones in New York. She just wanted the first half of that dial, got it, and was gone. Indiana Jones started this adventure because she duped him. She got him. And he just wasn't going to play that. And honestly, his pride got him to go and start this journey. But once it started, it started.
Yeah, and like I said, it was fun to watch him really fight against it. Like he did still care enough about her that he wanted to make sure she was okay. But I think it was more that than it was trying to get back to Dial of Destiny at that point. But she was just on another level. She had gotten, I guess, kind of broken, upset about her childhood because her father had kind of gone insane, obsessing over this whole Dial. And I think she looked to her godfather hoping he would be there for her, and Indiana Jones just wasn't. Like he couldn't really handle it either. I think some of it comes back to you mentioned his dad, and I found that interesting because I think it is sort of him kind of turning into his dad for a while there, which I mean happens. If a lot of people worry about turning into their parents, but that's who raised you, that's who you saw as your example when you were younger, and sometimes it just kind of happens without you realizing it. Not always a bad thing, but it did feel like that's kind of what happened here. His dad got obsessed with the Holy Grail and wasn't around much as a father. And I don't think Indiana Jones was there much for his goddaughter either. And that's kind of what turned her into this type of person she was, which was kind of annoying at first. But honestly, she grew on me as the movie went along.
Yeah, but you see, that's what the movie needed, though. It needed her as a character because just like in The Last Crusade, the Indy character was basically being played by Helena in this one, and the old Dr. Jones character was basically being played by Indiana at this point. So it would have just been boring if it was been another Indy versus the Nazis sort of thing. You kind of needed that extra character to give it a different sort of perspective and a different sort of new life into it.
I do like they didn't have her turn out to be working for the Nazis. I was kind of afraid that was going to happen. But it didn't. She was her own character completely. She wasn't that morally bankrupt, which I think may be the difference between her and the people that Indiana Jones used to fight against, is they were morally bankrupt enough not to care who was paying them, to the point that they would work with people like the Nazis, like in The Last Crusade, just to get what they want, which I don't think she was that bad, but certainly didn't mind buying and selling things off. Of course, she was selling off a piece of the Destiny that probably couldn't hurt anything by itself anyway, so maybe she didn't see that as an issue. Until the Nazis came along to complete it and find the rest.
But she, in a lot of ways, was very similar to the character of Belloc from Raiders of the Lost Ark, where she was sort of an archaeologist, but she was in it strictly for the money and the fame, not necessarily for preserving antiquities.
Oh, yeah. No, that's true.
I think she was in it out of spite, and she was the way she was to almost go against what her father did and how he handled it. I think this was almost a rebellion against her dad. Now, one thing that I found very interesting about this movie, and that is they took the character of Marion Ravenwood, even without her being on the camera, and filled in that narrative that we thought we knew after Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But they did the flashback scene, and part of that was they found like the stuff with, I think his name was Basil. And whenever they took the hat out and the whip out, you're like, oh, that's Indiana Jones. Well, there was also a picture of Marion Ravenwood, and this was in the early to mid 40s. So if Indiana Jones was still carrying around a picture of Marion Ravenwood, this is before Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This kind of cements the fact that Marion was his one true love that he had from the beginning, and even before the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, even after the events that separated her, because at this point, it would have been about 6 or 7 years since Raiders of the Lost Ark. Even since that, she was completely on his mind. And it's just like, honestly, he said in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, whenever she asked him, hasn't there been other women? It's like, there were other women, but the only problem was they weren't you. And this kind of cements that as well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Nice.
And
I do love that that's why I'm saying I think this should be the end, because they brought it full circle and had her come back in the end. And I think once he figured out who he was again and started acting like Indiana Jones. So it's a good, nice, happy ending.
Yeah, and they did it. They made a mistake, in my opinion, in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull by making her this smiley, giddy little schoolgirl that was just kind of fawning over Indy. And that was not Marion. And that in Raiders of the Lost Ark, that was not her. And in this one, they actually went out of their way to make her not smile. And everything. It was a much more serious version of Marion Ravenwood. And whenever they asked her, she was back, she mentioned that this person said you were Indy again, which means that all of this happened because Indiana Jones changed. Yeah. And that caused all the strain in the marriage. And then they redid the scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was absolutely perfect in reverse. Just a fantastic way to end the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah. Plus, they made him the kind of bitter and lose his way because of the death of his son, which was a nice way to make that character still matter without us having to see Shia LaBeouf again. So good job.
Yes.
So it was a win-win, exactly. And even with Marion, she basically over the course of the 3 movies, between Raiders, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and this one, she had the same sort of character arc, but just kind of in reverse that Indy had. You know, she started out as this completely, tough and independent woman in Raiders to the smiley, happy, whatever she was in Kingdom, back to the regular, as we knew her from 1981, Marion Ravenwood, in Dial of Destiny. So it was a very similar arc that both of them went on to come back together, and it tied it up nicely, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, and also, like I said, if you're watching this video still with the spoilers and everything, it is your fault at this point. The Dial of Destiny is about Archimedes' dial, and part of that is there's a time travel element to this. And the Germans get it, they activate it, and they're going to go back to, I think, 1939, and the villain is going to try and kill Hitler to put another Nazi in charge because he blames Hitler for the loss of World War II. Weird storyline, far-fetched, very Indiana Jones storyline. Yeah. But whenever they crank it up and do it, they go back to the siege of Syracuse with Archimedes. So we figure out that Archimedes actually built that dial. It wasn't to detect fissures and allow time travel. It was about bringing help to help them in their hopeless situation. And they go back and they do that, and there's one thing, there was no crazy villain death. And if you think of an Indiana Jones movie, there's usually a crazy villain death involved. That didn't necessarily happen in this movie. But it was pretty cool that after all this, everybody was so sure about what this was, none of them were right.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. Yeah, you're right. Nobody melted in this one. That's kind of disappointing, actually. But,
kind of a shame, yeah. Kind of a shame.
Or got torn apart by crocodiles. But anyway, no, the time travel element may put some people off. They may not like that as much, and I get it because I know the alien thing in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, people didn't like that at all. But this one, I think they at least kept pretty muted. It was just at the very end. It was a real quick. They went back. They realized, well, I say Indiana Jones wanted to stay, but he fortunately got overruled violently and was brought back to the future. They didn't stay. They didn't try and change anything. They didn't change anything in the past. It was a real quick, just this is what the dial was. This is why he built it, just to give him the incentive to go ahead and finish building it, so that because now he knows it works, so that they can then have their adventure in the future. You got to close that paradox loop, which they did.
Archimedes, the Indiana Jones, was talking about. I want to stay here because I always wanted to meet you or something like that. And Archimedes is you are always going to come here, man. Yeah. Because it's weird that the one person that actually understood what was going on, it was 300 BC at that point.
Yeah, but it's a very, like I said, quick little part of the movie and just an interesting side note. It's not really the point of the movie. So don't get caught. There's not a whole lot of crazy time travel in the movie.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions about that, go back and look up documentaries about the siege of the Syracuse by the Romans and the stuff that Archimedes built for that siege. He built basically a death ray to burn Roman ship sails. He built hooks to grab ships out of the water. It's pretty interesting, all the stuff that he really did. I mean, it almost sounds like sci-fi or an Indiana Jones movie, but he did it. So, I mean, that's pretty cool as well. Now, overall, I would rate this movie probably as my third favorite Indiana Jones movie. I'd put it just above Temple of Doom and above Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but behind Raiders and Last Crusade. What say you, Bill?
That's the perfect order. Raiders, Last Crusade, this one, Temple of Doom, and then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
How about you, Jeff?
I can't argue with that. Temple Doom is one I love because, I watched it when I was younger and really enjoyed. But I think this one probably was slightly better, honestly. So,
Yeah.
I agree with you.
It's just one of those things that like Nazi villains are the best Indiana Jones villains. It just is.
Yeah.
They make the best movies.
Yep.
Even whenever the movie is set in 1960, they still make the best villain. It's absolutely insane. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning into this. Hey, as you can see us, go see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's well worth it. You're going to hear a lot of people that are expecting Citizen Kane. Don't go into the movie theater expecting Citizen Kane. Go in there expecting Indiana Jones, and you'll be absolutely excited about it and have a good time. And that's really why this series was made in the beginning, to let the audience have a good time. And there's nothing wrong with having a good time. For Bill Couch and Jeb Beecham, I'm Stephen Willis. Thank you very much. We'll be back with another After Dark reaction and commentary piece. Take care.